So something is calling. Something is calling each of us in this very moment to be right here, to open our hearts to this way of being. And sometimes I say this new way of being, and that's not actually right at all. It's actually not opening our hearts to a new way of being. It's opening our hearts back up to our original way of being. The great remembering of what is our birthright, essence, spirit. I often call the spiritual journey the great remembering. I think I said this last week. Byron Katie calls it the great undoing, because it's those things we need to let go of to experience that. But for me, what resonates is the great remembering, because as we look into the eye of a child that hasn't yet begun to forget, we see that truth. So my calling that I said yes to was to be a witness and a catalyst for creating a community where we do that. We look into the eyes and see the truth of who we are. We see the beloved reflected back to us. So what we're talking about this month at Awakened Living is abundant living, and what it means to live your most dynamic, full, abundant life. And I want to just kind of recap the first few weeks to bring us current. The first week, we talked about what might be the first step toward living an abundant life. And again, what I mean by abundant is living out loud, living completely full, having the full of it, the experience of what is. As much love as we could ever imagine, as much money as we could ever imagine, as much positive relationships that we ever could imagine. The first step might be forgiveness. That's what we talked about the first week of this month at Awakened Living, because it's my stories that keep me, as Charles so beautifully says in the mind, when we talk about quieting the mind, my mind is filled with all kinds of reasons why I shouldn't be abundant. And I thought, actually what I was hoping for was that I was going to learn how to use the mind in a way that it was going to change its story. I actually went through many workshops, many classes, read many books on how to change the mind, to change the story to something that was going to support what I wanted in my life. It was a little crazy making for me. And what I loved about Charles' song today is he said we first have to learn to sing before we can learn to not sing. I'm assuming he gets the metaphor well. Because it's alive in that song. So I did go about learning to create a relationship with my mind. Actually, I went about changing my mind, trying to change my mind to support the story I wanted. And ultimately, it came down to me needing to let go of that belief system, let go of that orientation to the world. So forgiveness is a powerful step, because if I feel the need to forgive something, it means I'm believing the illusion that something was wrong with myself and with others and with a situation. And in this conversation, sometimes people will say to me, well, how can that always be true? Because sometimes things are wrong. Okay. I work in the mental health field working with people in recovery from addiction. And many people in that experience of suffering from addiction or living in addiction often have pretty horrendous experiences in childhood. Not always, but quite often. So forgiveness might be a concept that is not an easy leap in that area. But what we're talking about, what I'm talking about, is now that I'm fully adult, at least in theory, what am I going to do with that? See? So I have to, at some point, make peace with that, or that story is going to continue to be my story. So that's why in the first week of this month, we looked at forgiveness as a tool for letting go of anything that might stand in my way of experiencing my wholeness. The next week, we talked about the paradox of manifestation. And I shared a lot from my personal story about how I was so focused on what it needed to look like, or so focused on the manifestation, that things weren't happening. And the greatest paradox was as soon as I recognized that I didn't need anything to manifest for me to be whole and perfect, the paradox was as soon as I recognized that I was whole and perfect, like magic, the universe seemed to respond and give me more of those things that I wanted, that I once thought would make me happy. So did we hear that? I believed that I needed to manifest something in order to be happy, like a job, a partner, whatever it is. And I began to understand that if I recognize that I already am that I don't need anything, the paradox is as soon as I got that, something changed in my vibration and my vibrational quality in the world, and suddenly I was attracted to things that supported what I wanted all along. But see, it's my belief. That's one of the words I'm wanting to let go of. It's my experience that has shown me that I can't trick the universe with that one. Because believe me, I've tried. I feel like when I get this job, I'm going to be happy, so I go about it. But then I try to trick the universe. I know I don't need it. All along, like I need this job. And then, as I said one other week, nothing's more painful than 99% surrender. So when I'm at that almost point, and then finally I recognize I don't need anything except for a recognition that I'm already all that I've been looking for. Here's the job. It's the way it feels like consciousness works. And then last week we talked about divine integration. And what I meant by divine integration is beginning to look at how I view some parts of my life as human and some parts as spiritual. And if I'm doing that, if I'm sensing the world in that kind of duality, then my next step would be, then let me get rid of the human. So divine integration is let me actually step fully into my humanness. It was a Teilhard that said we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And I woke up one day and thought, what if we're actually spiritual beings having a spiritual experience? And that everything that I was calling human, or I might call bad, see, pain is part of life. But suffering is when I attach to wanting to not be there, or that I think it needs to look a certain way. So in my own spiritual journey, I thought that the intention of enlightenment was to remove my humanness. And when I woke up one day and realized that it's all spiritual, then the integration was actually, one more time, just seemed to happen naturally. Like, I can suddenly have so much compassion for those parts of myself that I used to judge and want to remove. And then the integration happens. And then we evolve. So integration always precedes transformation. So that brings us to this week. And of course, as the universe has it orchestrated, if that's true that the universe has anything orchestrated, sometimes I'm not sure about that one, but what my orientation to it is at this moment is that the next topic that seems natural in the conversation of abundance is gratitude, and how it's the accelerant for this process. And guess what? Here it is Thanksgiving. So we're on week 4, and it's Thanksgiving, and there's going to be a lot of conversation about gratitude. Possible that everywhere we go in the next week or so, people are going to be talking about gratitude, the role of gratitude, what gratitude is, and inevitably what I hear happening when we talk about gratitude is we start making a list of all the things we're grateful for. I'm grateful for this, I'm grateful for my loving mother, I'm grateful for... And what I'm inviting is what happens when I begin to see gratitude as a way of being, rather than being grateful for something. What happens when I begin, as we talk about this divine integration, of not saying I'm grateful for this but not for that. That I have made a decision that I'm going to be grateful in this world. My partner Will can attest that I don't always live that. Especially like at Kinko sometimes, or in line, and it's like, can I choose gratitude no matter what. And I want to be clear of what gratitude, I guess maybe we'll have a conversation about what gratitude is in a minute. But to me, gratitude is something about opening my heart in a non-judgmental, connected, loving way to what is. And so can I do that to everything, with everything? My ego mind used to want to say no. But then something happened when I moved from no to maybe. Things started to shift. Because what I've noticed in my own journey, when I change from needing to know to wanting to question, when I move away from theology, belief, and ideology and into the great unknown and the great question, things change. And I have a few favorite questions that might accelerate this. Like, is it possible to keep my heart open to every situation? How many people in this room have experienced something that's incredibly difficult and painful? We might go through it with a lot of difficulty, maybe even resistance, maybe some anger, maybe some frustration, only to have 6 months later or a year later think, God, that was the best thing that could have ever possibly happened to me. Why? Because it opened us up in a different way, right? It changed the way I see the world. So my invitation for each of us in this moment is to recognize what gratitude is. What gratitude is to me is to be an open-hearted, connected being, living from the inside out. Recognizing that I'm always choosing. I just may not know I'm always choosing. And questioning everything. See, because I also do counseling individually with people, and most people will come to me and they will say something like, I'm really unhappy with this. It might be a relationship, it might be wanting a relationship, it might be a job, it might be wanting a job. I'm really unhappy with this. And we start talking about what the steps to changing that are, and when we get to the point where we start asking ourselves honestly, how am I viewing the world? How am I seeing the world? And is it possible the way I'm seeing the world is creating the way the world is reflecting back to me? Not everyone's willing to take that next step. Because see, all of us want our lives to change in some way, but do I want to change? And so, life has become actually quite simple for me. Notice I didn't say easy. Although I like that it's easy as well. Simple. If I want my life to look different, I start from the inside. I look at how I'm viewing the situation. I see what in me, in my consciousness, wants and needs to change in order for me to see a different experience. And like magic, the experience changes. So when I'm up against something that feels painful, I simply begin to ask myself some questions. How am I seeing this? What else is possible? What do I really want? Who have I come here to be? And what happens is when I get clear on that relationship with myself and with spirit, what happens on the outside becomes only a response to that. It no longer becomes the thing that I want to be. So in closing, what I want to say about gratitude is that it is the truth of who we are. It is the absolute truth. Our essence is love. Our essence is connection. Everything else is a story that was taught to me by someone unknowingly or unconsciously telling me some story about the way the world is, which isn't true. So as I gently unsing the song of my life and tap into the silence and really know what is, that's abundance. That's it. When I get there, when I know that, when I'm at the point where absolutely nothing outside of me needs to change, that's the point where I've arrived at